You ever been judged before a single word came out your mouth? Ever had someone decide who you were just by looking at you? Well, today's story is about a man who faced that exact situation. A man who walked through life not only with purpose but with power, yet to some folks all they saw was the color of his skin. And on one hot afternoon in the middle of downtown Atlanta, that ignorance came face to face with reality. So grab a seat because you won't believe how this unfolds. It was around 3:15 p.m. on a Tuesday when Jamal Hunter stepped out of his black SUV and headed down Peachtree Street. He was dressed in a plain gray hoodie, dark jeans, and Timberland boots. Nothing flashy, nothing loud. Just a man on his way to a meeting. His expression was calm, serious, focused. But to Officer Darren Kessler, sitting in his patrol cruiser across the street, Jamal didn't look like someone heading to a meeting. No, to Darren he fit the description. Which description? Darren never clarified. But his narrowed eyes and clenched jaw told you everything you needed to know. He'd already made up his mind. Jamal had been walking barely a block when the squad car eased off the curb and slowly pulled up beside him. The window rolled down with a lazy hum. "Hey!" Darren barked, voice firm and loaded with suspicion. Jamal stopped, turned calmly and nodded. "Afternoon, officer." But Darren didn't return the politeness. "Where you headed?" Jamal raised an eyebrow but didn't flinch. "To an appointment. Just down the street." Darren leaned further out the window. "You live around here?" "Yes," Jamal answered, his tone still even, still respectful. "I've lived in Atlanta my whole life." But Darren's hand was already moving toward the door handle. "Step over here, please. Just a routine stop." "Routine?" Jamal's jaw tensed slightly. He'd heard that before. Too many times. Jamal stepped onto the sidewalk as Darren exited the car, now joined by his partner, Officer Mendez, who had remained silent until now. "Got ID?" Darren demanded. Jamal reached slowly into his pocket, pulled out his wallet and handed over his driver's license. Darren examined it like it was fake, flipping it over, squinting, reading the name out loud like he was searching for something to poke holes in. "Jamal Hunter, huh?" Jamal nodded. "That's me. You a student or something?" "No." "So what do you do then?" "I work," Jamal replied. Darren smirked. "Where?" "Right now," Jamal said with a controlled breath. "I'm on my way to a federal meeting downtown." That made Darren pause. "Federal? What kind of meeting?" Jamal just stared back, calm but unwavering. "It's confidential." Now Darren's tone sharpened. "Confidential, huh? Look, don't play games with me. You fit the profile of someone we've been watching. There's been break-ins in this area. And you're acting nervous." Jamal exhaled slowly. "I'm not nervous. I'm just tired of being profiled." Darren snapped his fingers at Mendez. "Pat him down." "What?" Jamal took a step back. "I've done nothing wrong." Mendez hesitated for a second, glancing between Jamal and his partner. But Darren's glare pushed him forward. "Just cooperate, man. It'll be over in a minute," Mendez muttered. Jamal raised his hands slowly, not because he had to, but because he knew better. He'd been trained for situations just like this. But not as a civilian. No, Jamal was trained by the government. As Mendez started patting him down, Darren spoke into his radio, calling in a suspicious individual. Jamal could feel the stares of pedestrians around him. Phones were coming out. Bystanders were recording. One young black woman in a bright red sundress stood frozen on the corner, shaking her head, whispering, "They're doing it again." The pat-down revealed nothing. No weapons. No drugs. Nothing illegal. Still, Darren wasn't done. He turned to Mendez. "Run his name. Let's see what else he's hiding." "Officer," Jamal said firmly, now locking eyes with Darren. "You're making a mistake." Darren scoffed. "The only mistake would be letting someone like you walk away before I know what you're up to." As Mendez stepped aside to run the name, Jamal finally reached into the inside of his jacket, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a slim leather badge holder. He opened it. Darren's smug expression evaporated. There, gleaming in the sunlight, was a federal badge. Not just any badge, one belonging to the Department of Homeland Security. And underneath it, a federal ID with the name, Special Agent Jamal Hunter. Darren blinked. What is this?" Jamal answered calmly, "It's my badge. I'm a federal agent. Been with DHS for 8 years. I'm here on a classified task force. And I told you, I had a meeting." Mendez returned, breathless. His record's clean. Actually, he's listed in the system as a... Yeah, Jamal cut in, eyes never leaving Darren's face. That's right. Darren's face flushed red. Why didn't you say so earlier? Jamal snapped his badge shut. I didn't have to. Just like you didn't have to stop me. The crowd around them was growing. A few people clapped. Someone shouted, "That's what you get." Darren looked around nervously, adjusting his belt, suddenly unsure of himself. But Jamal wasn't done. "Let me ask you something," he said coolly. "If I were a white man in a suit, would you have stopped me?" Darren stammered. "We had reports of break-ins. And I looked suspicious." "I get it." Just then, a black sedan pulled up to the curb, and a sharply dressed white man in his 50s stepped out. He glanced at Jamal, then the officers. "Agent Hunter," he called out. "We're already late. Everything all right here?" Jamal gave him a nod. "We're good, Director." "Director." Darren's jaw dropped. Jamal turned to Darren one last time. You could have asked questions. You could have de-escalated. But instead you chose to intimidate. That says more about you than it does about me." Darren was speechless. Mendez looked like he wanted to disappear. Jamal walked away without another word, climbing into the sedan with the director. The car pulled off, leaving Darren standing in the middle of the sidewalk, looking like the ground had just shifted beneath him. But little did Jamal know, that wouldn't be the last time their paths would cross. Because just days later, during a high-level federal operation involving local law enforcement, Darren would find himself in a situation he couldn't control. And this time he would be the one begging for help. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths. 3 days had passed since that hot afternoon on Peachtree Street. But the moment kept replaying in Darren's head. The crowd. The badge. The humiliation. Every time he closed his eyes he saw Jamal's face, calm, firm, fearless. And the look on his captain's face afterward? Pure disappointment. "Do better, Kessler," Captain Rourke had said. "We don't need hotheads making us look like fools, especially not in this political climate." Darren tried to brush it off, pretending like it didn't matter. But deep down it did. Because he hadn't just embarrassed himself, he'd been exposed. His bias, his assumptions, his power trip, it had all been laid bare. And worse? He was now under internal review. Meanwhile, across town, Jamal Hunter was back at work. He hadn't told his superiors everything about the incident. They'd heard enough just from the witnesses and the viral video that hit social media the next morning. The video had over 600,000 views in 48 hours. #AgentWhileBlack was trending. Jamal's face was all over TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. But he wasn't celebrating. He was focused. Because right now he had more important things on his plate. Atlanta had recently become the hub for a massive federal investigation, an underground trafficking network that had ties to multiple states, corrupt local officials, and dirty cops. DHS, FBI, and the DEA had joined forces for a joint operation. Jamal was part of the intelligence team overseeing key arrests, and today he had a meeting to finalize logistics with local law enforcement. And guess who was part of that meeting? That's right, APD's Zone 3 Special Task Force, the very same division where Darren Kessler worked. Jamal walked into the operations briefing room at 8 a.m. sharp. Suit on, credentials ready, energy calm but commanding. The room was filled with law enforcement from different agencies. State troopers. Federal agents. APD officers. Darren was sitting toward the back with his arms crossed, eyes narrowing when Jamal entered. Mendez was beside him, quiet and tense. The commanding officer, a no-nonsense black woman named Lieutenant Colonel Briggs, took the floor. "All right, listen up. This joint op is targeting high-risk suspects involved in organized trafficking, drugs, and weapons. We've tracked them to a warehouse in East Point. We move in 48 hours. No mistakes. Agent Hunter will be leading tactical intelligence and coordination." All eyes turned to Jamal as she gestured toward him. Agent Hunter walked them through the map. Jamal stepped forward, voice steady and precise. "We've confirmed that the warehouse is a front. Intel shows up to 15 armed individuals inside, possibly more. We have eyes on the perimeter and thermal scans confirm movement patterns consistent with smuggling operations. Our goal is to extract intel, secure suspects, and preserve evidence. No cowboy moves. This isn't about ego, this is about results. He didn't even look at Darren. But Darren felt like he'd just been slapped in the face. To him it was personal now. The man he once tried to humiliate was now giving him orders. And it burned. After the meeting, as the teams filed out, Darren approached Jamal. "You really gonna stand up there like you're some kind of hero?" he asked, voice low and dripping with resentment. Jamal didn't miss a beat. "I'm just doing my job, Officer Kessler. Maybe you should try it." Darren stepped closer. "You think you're better than everyone else because you got a badge and a suit?" Jamal turned to him calmly. "I don't think I'm better. I expect better. Especially from someone who swore an oath." For a second it looked like Darren might lash out, but Mendez pulled him back. "Let it go, man." But Darren wasn't about to let it go. Not even close. That night, Jamal worked late at the command center. He had intel coming in from a wiretap that revealed a last-minute change in the warehouse's internal layout. He updated the maps, submitted it to the APD team, and then noticed something strange. Darren hadn't signed the coordination logs for the raid. He was supposed to be on the perimeter team. But his file had been removed from the system. Reassigned. Suspiciously quiet. Jamal flagged it but didn't jump to conclusions. He'd seen cops like Darren before, cocky, insecure, quick to react but slow to learn. He hoped Darren wouldn't do anything stupid. He was wrong. The next evening, 24 hours before the operation, Darren decided he was going to prove himself. He wanted to get ahead of the raid. Make a name for himself. Beat the feds to it, he told Mendez. Show M who's really doing the work on the streets. Mendez hesitated. "This ain't the move, bro. We don't have backup. This place is dangerous." But Darren wasn't listening. Around midnight, Jamal got a call from one of the field informants. "Agent Hunter," the voice said urgently. "Something's off. There's movement at the warehouse. Not from inside, from the outside. A lone APD cruiser just pulled up to the rear fence. 2 men got out. I think it's one of your guys." Jamal's blood ran cold. He jumped to his feet and called Lieutenant Briggs. "We got a rogue move. APD officers just broke protocol and went in ahead of the raid. They could blow the whole op." Within minutes, Jamal was in a black unmarked SUV racing toward East Point. The radio buzzed with confusion. Tactical teams were scrambling to redirect. But they might already be too late. At the warehouse, Darren and Mendez were creeping through the dark alley behind the building. Darren had his hand on his weapon, flashlight off. "We get in, we catch him by surprise," he whispered. "Get the glory, get the credit." Mendez looked pale. "This is suicide. You don't even know what's inside." Darren ignored him. They climbed over the fence and slipped through a side entrance. But what they didn't know was that they were being watched. Cameras. Motion sensors. One of the gang's lookouts saw them the second they entered and hit the silent alarm. Inside, the warehouse came alive, armed men snapping into formation, lights shut off, red lasers activated, assault rifles drawn. These weren't street thugs. These were trained mercs. Back in the SUV, Jamal's phone rang again. It was the informant. They triggered the alarm. The gang's mobilizing. Those 2 cops, they walked right into a trap. Jamal slammed his fist on the dashboard. "Tell the backup team to move now. I'm 5 minutes out." Inside the warehouse, Darren and Mendez were suddenly blinded by a flashbang. Boom. They dropped to the ground, disoriented. Voices shouted in Spanish. Guns cocked. Darren reached for his weapon, but it was kicked away. One of the gang members, a tall, tattooed man with a jagged scar across his neck, grabbed Darren by the collar and pressed a gun to his head. "Say goodnight, cop." Darren's eyes widened in panic. He was done. No backup. No way out. Suddenly, crash. The main entrance exploded inward. Smoke filled the air. Tactical flashlights pierced the darkness. A booming voice echoed through the chaos. "Federal agents. Drop your weapons." It was Jamal. He came in with full DHS tactical support. Shields up, rifles raised, body armor on. The warehouse erupted in gunfire. Chaos. Screams. Smoke. Strobe lights. One by one, gang members were subdued. Jamal's team moved like a precision unit. In the corner, Darren lay flat on the floor, bleeding from the mouth, arms over his head. Jamal spotted him, ran toward him, shoved a gunman off his chest, and dragged Darren behind cover. Darren stared at him, dazed. Why'd you come back for me?" Jamal didn't answer. He was already scanning the room for Mendez, who disappeared into the shadows. And that's when it happened. A sudden scream. Then a gunshot. Jamal turned sharply and saw Mendez on the ground, clutching his stomach. And standing over him, gun in hand, was someone they didn't expect. A uniformed APD sergeant. Someone from inside the department. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there. Jamal's eyes narrowed. Wait, that's Sergeant Doyle. What the hell is he doing here? But before Jamal could move, Doyle turned the gun toward him. You should have stayed out of this, Agent Hunter. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths. Last time, Special Agent Jamal Hunter charged into a deadly warehouse raid to save 2 reckless officers who went rogue, one of them being Officer Darren Kessler, the same man who racially profiled him just days before. But things took a dark turn when Jamal discovered someone on the inside was working against them. A uniformed APD sergeant, Sergeant Doyle, showed up unexpectedly, shot Mendez and turned his weapon on Jamal. And now, in the middle of chaos and smoke, Jamal stood face to face with a man he once called a brother in law enforcement, now pointing a gun straight at him. But this was bigger than just a betrayal. This was about corruption, race, power, and what happens when a system starts to eat itself from the inside out. And trust me, what's about to happen next will leave you breathless. Jamal didn't flinch. His Glock was up, finger on the trigger locked on Doyle's chest. But his mind was racing. Doyle wasn't supposed to be on this raid. He wasn't even on the task force. So why was he here, and why had he just shot a fellow cop? The smoke swirled between them, red and blue strobes flashing from outside, illuminating Doyle's twisted smile. Put it down, Hunter, Doyle said, voice calm but venomous. You don't know what you've walked into. Jamal didn't lower his weapon. I know enough. You shot a cop. You've compromised a federal raid. And you're going to answer for it. Doyle's eyes flickered to the gang members still on the floor, some cuffed, others wounded, and several dead. This was never supposed to be your operation. You feds think you can just swoop in and clean up what we've been managing for years? You don't know this city like I do. And you sure as hell don't understand what's at stake. Behind Jamal, he could hear Darren groaning on the floor, still in pain but conscious. Mendez was barely breathing. Blood soaked his uniform. Jamal had seconds to decide. Take the shot or try to de-escalate. He didn't want to kill a cop. But Doyle clearly didn't share that restraint. You've been working with them, haven't you? Jamal said, trying to buy time. The traffickers. You're the leak. Doyle smirked. Smart man. Suddenly, from behind a stack of crates, one of the gang members, wounded but not out, lifted a semi-automatic and took aim at Jamal. Pop pop pop. Jamal spun and dropped to the ground just in time, returning fire. 3 rapid shots. The shooter went down. But the momentary distraction gave Doyle what he wanted. He slipped away through the shadows, disappearing into a side hallway. Jamal cursed under his breath and rushed to Mendez. Stay with me, officer, he said, applying pressure to the wound. Darren crawled over, pale and trembling, staring at Jamal in shock. You saved us. Jamal didn't look at him. I saved your partner. You're just lucky I didn't leave you there. The DHS tactical team stormed in seconds later, securing the perimeter and transporting the wounded. Jamal gave them orders to sweep the facility but knew Doyle was long gone. 2 hours later, Jamal sat in the mobile command truck, reviewing surveillance feeds. He rewound one of the body cam footages and paused. There. Clear as day. Doyle slipping a small black device, a GPS jammer, into the equipment shelf near the communications panel. That's why the radio failed. That's why the gang was ready. This wasn't a slip-up. It was a setup. Lieutenant Colonel Briggs walked in, tense. Agent Hunter, we confirmed Sergeant Doyle's access codes were active last night. Someone higher up greenlit his involvement. Someone inside. Jamal stood. We need to follow the money. Pull every name connected to Doyle's shift schedules, internal reviews, disciplinary reports, payroll anomalies, whatever it takes. Briggs nodded. There's something else. We found this in Doyle's locker. She held up a flash drive. Jamal inserted it into a secure laptop. The files were encrypted, but one folder caught his eye, Project Smokehouse. Inside were dozens of names, some marked with green dots, others red. Some were known gang members. But several names, they weren't criminals at all. They were officers, detectives, even judges. Jamal leaned in. This isn't just corruption. This is a network. He scrolled further, one file labeled hunter_j.pdf. He clicked and froze. Inside was a full dossier on him. Photos of him walking into his home. Shots of his car. Personal contacts. Even pictures of his younger sister, Jasmine, who lived in Decatur and had nothing to do with law enforcement. His heart raced. They're watching my family. Briggs whispered, they're targeting you. Just then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Against protocol, he answered. A distorted voice came through, back off, Agent Hunter. You've already seen too much. Keep digging and next time it won't be a warning. Click. Jamal's hands tightened into fists. Briggs stared at him. You okay? No, he said, eyes cold. But I will be once I burn every last one of them down. The next day, Internal Affairs began rounding up low-level officers with ties to Doyle. 3 arrests, 2 suspensions. But the higher-ups were still untouched. And Doyle? He vanished. No sign. No trace. Jamal began working double shifts. His instincts were sharper. He started running his own off-the-record investigation. He dug into every connection Doyle had, old academy records, fraternities, loan data, political donations. Then he found it. A non-profit foundation Doyle's wife managed, Future Horizon. It received quarterly donations from a defense contractor named Halbridge Solutions. Halbridge wasn't just any contractor. They had ties to a private prison company. And they'd been lobbying local legislators for years. Jamal followed the trail to a man named Logan Prescott, a billionaire CEO and city influencer known for backroom deals and political endorsements. Prescott had hosted APD fundraisers, donated to sheriff re-election campaigns, and, most damning, served on the advisory board for the same Future Horizon Foundation funding Doyle's family. Jamal knew then, this wasn't just dirty cops. This was a criminal enterprise dressed in blue suits and money. But he didn't realize how close it had gotten until he returned home that night. He walked into his condo, dropped his keys, and froze. The door wasn't locked. Lights were on. He reached for his weapon, crept through the hallway, room by room, cleared the kitchen, living room, guest room. Then he stepped into his bedroom and found a photo pinned to the wall. A picture of his sister Jasmine, sleeping in her apartment. The note underneath it read, "We warned you." Just then his phone rang again. Same unknown number. This time the voice was clearer. Mel. Southern accent. Confident. You think you're the hero, Hunter. But in this city we own the system. We don't need to kill you. We just need to remind you, we can. Click. Jamal stood there, silent, heart pounding, fury rising in his chest. This wasn't about justice anymore. This was personal. And now, with everything at stake, there was only one person left who could help him go deeper into the shadows of this operation. Someone who knew the streets, the politics, and the rot from the inside. Someone he'd never wanted to see again. Officer Darren Kessler. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths. Last time, Special Agent Jamal Hunter uncovered the horrifying truth behind Sergeant Doyle's betrayal. This wasn't just one dirty cop. This was a full-blown criminal network reaching into law enforcement, politics, and corporate boardrooms. And now it was personal. They'd left a photo of Jamal's sister asleep in her apartment, a silent threat pinned to his bedroom wall. Someone wanted to break him, but they didn't know Jamal. He'd been underestimated before. He'd been profiled, humiliated, and targeted. But now, he was coming for them. And he wasn't coming alone. Because to take down a system this dirty, Jamal needed help from the most unlikely source. The same man who once tried to break him. Officer Darren Kessler. And this time nobody would see it coming. It was just past 7 a.m. when Jamal pulled into the small suburban driveway where Darren had been laying low. After the raid fiasco and the internal review board breathing down his neck, Darren had taken leave. Voluntary but not optional. He hadn't spoken to anyone in days. But when he opened the door and saw Jamal standing there, face cold, eyes sharp, something in him braced. "What do you want?" Darren asked. Jamal didn't flinch. "You want redemption? Here's your chance." Darren let out a bitter laugh. "Redemption? I'm a disgraced patrol cop who's probably getting canned in a week." "Exactly," Jamal said. "You got nothing left to lose. Darren narrowed his eyes. What are you asking me to do? I need someone on the inside, Jamal said. Someone who still knows the precinct, the politics, the people who play dirty when no one's watching. You said it yourself. You've seen this city's underbelly. Well, guess what? That underbelly's infected. And it goes deeper than both of us. Darren looked down, conflicted. You really trust me? Jamal took a long breath. No. But I trust what failure does to a man. Either it breaks him, or it builds him. I'm betting you're done being broken. Something changed in Darren's face. A flicker of the officer he once wanted to be. He stepped aside. Come in. Over coffee and surveillance files, Jamal laid out everything. The photo threat, the flash drive from Doyle's locker, the Halbridge Solutions connection, and the Prescott Foundation money trail. Darren sat in stunned silence. I knew there was rot, he muttered. But I didn't know it went this deep. Oh, it does, Jamal said. And Doyle's just the tip. Prescott's the key. He's laundering dirty money through his nonprofit and buying silence from cops, politicians, and judges. We bring him down, we expose the whole system. But we need proof, Darren said. Court admissible. Ironclad. Otherwise he'll walk. Jamal nodded. And I know where we can get it. According to the flash drive, Prescott held weekly strategy meetings at a private members-only cigar lounge downtown. No cameras. No official entry logs. Just whispered deals and invisible power plays. But Jamal's team had traced a new shipment of encrypted burner phones delivered directly to the club's back entrance. Phones used to coordinate bribes and cover-ups. Jamal and Darren devised a plan. Infiltrate the club during the next meeting, plant a high-grade audio transmitter, and extract raw conversations between Prescott, Doyle, if he resurfaced, and anyone else tied to Project Smokehouse. But they'd need help. That's where Jasmine came in. Jamal's sister had once been a tech consultant for a national security firm. She left the field years ago after witnessing unethical practices, but when Jamal told her what was happening, and showed her the photo, they both knew she couldn't sit this one out. You really trust him? She asked Jamal, nodding toward Darren. Jamal replied, I don't trust him. I trust what he's lost. Jasmine gave Darren a hard stare. Don't screw this up. The plan moved quickly. Jasmine hacked into the lounge's security feed and created a 10-minute blind spot window. Darren still had a precinct-issued badge that could pass first-tier access checks. Jamal would pose as an assistant from a lobbying group with a fake identity tied to one of Prescott's shell companies. They rehearsed everything: timing, code words, exit strategy. The night of the infiltration arrived. Downtown Atlanta buzzed like any other Thursday, but beneath the surface, war was brewing. Darren entered first, flashing his badge to the doorman. APD. Just checking in on a safety protocol sweep. Shouldn't take more than 10 minutes. The doorman, barely awake, waved him through. 2 minutes later, Jamal entered through the back, posing as Trevor Simmons, a logistics director from Halbridge shipping branch. His suit was crisp, his ID perfectly forged, and his voice carried that blend of arrogance and charm that Prescott's people admired. Inside, the air was thick with cigar smoke, bourbon, and whispered secrets. Jamal moved toward the conference room. Through the frosted glass, he could see Prescott seated at the head of the table, flanked by 3 men in dark suits, and to his left, just out of the shadows, stood Doyle. Alive. Confident. Armed. Jamal's pulse quickened, but he kept moving. Darren circled around to the AV panel, planted the transmitter, and gave the signal. Jasmine, monitoring from a remote van nearby, confirmed, signal strong. Audio's clean. What they captured in the next 10 minutes would shatter everything. Prescott bragged openly about funneling cash through city contracts, calling judges investments, and describing accidental police shootings as good headlines for more funding. He even laughed about the warehouse raid. You know, Prescott chuckled, we almost lost Doyle. But that black agent, Hunter, he's got a hero complex. Makes him predictable. Doyle nodded. He'll come after me eventually. But he won't reach me before I reach him. Jamal clenched his fists. His face stayed calm, but his heart thundered. Suddenly, one of the men at the table turned his head. Wait, he said. Who's that by the bar? Darren, trying to blend in, pretended to sip a drink. That's nobody, Doyle said casually, but his eyes locked on Darren. Just a patrol guy. I know him. He's cool. Prescott squinted. He looks familiar. Jamal made a snap decision. He picked up a glass of scotch, walked toward the table, and spoke in a sharp Boston accent. Mr. Prescott? Trevor Simmons. Elbridge. We met at the Jacksonville event. Prescott looked up, mildly annoyed. Oh, right. Logistics guy. What do you want? Just making sure the next shipment is routed through the correct drop point. Didn't want to interrupt. Prescott waved him off. You already did. We're done here anyway. The men stood to leave. Doyle's eyes lingered on Darren, then narrowed. Hold up, he said, stepping closer. You sure I know you? Darren stiffened. Yeah. We met at the 12th precinct. 2 years back. Doyle frowned. You were wearing a beard then. Darren's throat tightened. Shaved it. Jamal jumped in. Mr. Prescott, our contact will follow up with the route confirmation in 48 hours. Expect the payment routing to update by then. Prescott grunted, and the men moved toward the exit. Jamal and Darren waited 30 seconds, then sprinted out the back. Jasmine. Jamal shouted into the mic, cut the signal. We're done. Back in the surveillance van, Jasmine hit the kill switch. Copy that. Audio secured. They drove off into the night, adrenaline coursing through their veins. Back at the safe house, they played the audio line by line. It was gold. Prosecutors would salivate. The FBI would have to act. There was enough to indict half the city's power players. But just as they were uploading it to the secure DHS server, blackout. The lights cut out. The power grid dropped. The house plunged into darkness. Jamal's phone lit up. One message. You should have walked away. Suddenly, gunfire erupted outside. Glass shattered. A flashbang exploded in the living room. Jasmine screamed. Darren ducked for cover. Jamal grabbed his weapon. They were under attack. He yelled, "We've been compromised." Outside, 3 SUVs screeched into the driveway, men in tactical gear, faces masked, weapons drawn. This wasn't a random hit. This was a professional hit squad. Sent by Prescott. Sent to erase everything. And just as Jamal turned toward the safe room with the hard drive in hand, a masked man kicked in the door, raised his weapon, and fired. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths. Last time, everything came crashing down. Agent Jamal Hunter and disgraced Officer Darren Kessler had finally gathered enough proof to take down the corrupt billionaire Logan Prescott, rogue cop Sergeant Doyle, and the criminal empire rotting Atlanta from the inside out. But just as they prepared to upload the damning evidence, the lights cut out. A Black Ops hit squad descended on Jamal's safe house, sent by Prescott to erase the problem once and for all. Bullets ripped through windows, flashbangs thundered through the walls, and a masked man stormed into the room with his weapon raised. And in that final second, as a shot rang out, it seemed like it was all over. But Jamal Hunter didn't come this far to lose. Bang! The bullet struck, but it wasn't Jamal who fell. Darren Kessler dove in front of Jamal at the last second, taking the hit to the shoulder and crashing into the floor with a painful grunt. Blood soaked through his shirt, but he was alive. Jamal returned fire instinctively, neutralizing the attacker. 2 more gunmen entered through the back. Jasmine screamed from the hallway, ducking behind the server cabinet as bullets whizzed past her head. Jamal grabbed the encrypted hard drive and tucked it into a ballistic bag, yelling to Darren, "Can you move?" Darren, groaning in pain, nodded. "Go, I've got the door." Jamal didn't argue. He sprinted across the hallway, grabbed Jasmine, and pulled her into the panic vault just as more attackers burst through the garage. Gunfire lit up the walls like fireworks. Darren emptied his clip into the intruders, forcing them to scatter, but he was losing blood fast. Jamal activated the emergency beacon from the panic room, sending a signal directly to a covert DHS recovery unit. The vault's reinforced walls held strong, but the clock was ticking. Outside, the hit squad regrouped. "We need that drive," one of them growled into a radio. "Target is still alive." Inside the vault, Jamal wrapped Jasmine in a blanket, handed her a backup pistol, and then turned to the screen to watch Darren's body cam footage live streaming to the vault's monitor. The camera showed him crawling toward the front door, dragging himself, one arm limp, blood trailing behind him. Jamal gritted his teeth. He's not going to make it. Jasmine looked up, scared but fierce. "You can't go out there." "I have to," Jamal said. He gave me a second chance when I never gave him one. I owe him. With that, Jamal keyed open the emergency hatch and slipped out the back. He circled around the garage, moving silently in the dark, picking off 2 attackers with clean shots to the leg and shoulder. He grabbed one of their radios and spoke into it. "You want the drive?" he said coldly. "Come get it. But just know, if you come through that door you're not walking out." The radio crackled. "Hunter, you should have stayed in your lane." Jamal's voice was ice. "You should have stayed in yours." Just then the backup arrived. Unmarked DHS and FBI vehicles screeched to a stop at the curb. Floodlights cut through the blackness. Tactical teams stormed the house. Within 60 seconds the entire hit squad was subdued, disarmed and zip-tied on the lawn. Inside, medics rushed to Darren's side and stabilized him. Jamal returned to the vault and helped Jasmine out safely. Prescott had sent killers to erase Jamal, destroy the evidence and silence the truth, but he'd failed. And now, it was Jamal's turn. 3 days later, at a closed-door federal hearing, Jamal presented the hard drive, the surveillance footage, the audio files, and the list of names involved in Project Smokehouse. It was the biggest corruption case in Georgia's history. Arrest warrants went out for 42 individuals: cops, judges, politicians, business owners. Prescott's assets were frozen. Doyle was captured at a safe house in Alabama and charged with conspiracy, attempted murder, obstruction of justice, and corruption under RICO. But it wasn't just about the arrests. Jamal stood at a press conference surrounded by FBI, DHS, and local leaders, holding up a framed copy of the Atlanta Constitution newspaper. The headline read, "Federal Agent Who Was Racially Profiled Uncovers Citywide Corruption Ring." He looked into the cameras and said, "This isn't about me. It's about what happens when the system forgets who it was made to serve. When power replaces justice. When the badge becomes a mask instead of a promise. Today we took one step closer to rebuilding trust. But the real work? That starts tomorrow." Officer Darren Kessler, still in a sling, stood off to the side watching. He wasn't the hero of the story. But he wasn't the villain anymore either. Later that week, Jamal visited his sister Jasmine, who was back in her apartment and under full federal protection. As they sat on the porch watching the sunset, she asked, "You ever think about quitting?" He smiled faintly. "Every day. But then I remember, if I don't show up, who will?" That night, Jamal got a call from his director. "Hunter, the Bureau's offering you a promotion. DC Task Force. You earned it." Jamal paused, then replied, "Thanks. But I'm staying right here in Atlanta. My city still needs cleaning." The camera would have faded out on that, our hero choosing duty over glory, the job over the spotlight, and the people over politics. But just before the story ended, one more twist. That evening, as Jamal walked to his car, he noticed something odd, a slip of paper under his windshield wiper. He unfolded it slowly. One sentence. "You cut off one head, but the snake has more." Jamal folded the note, slid it into his coat pocket and whispered to himself, "Let's go hunting." Don't ever judge someone by how they look, especially when they walk with quiet strength. Power doesn't always come in a suit or with a spotlight. Sometimes it walks in silence, stands in the shadows, and serves with purpose. Racial profiling doesn't just humiliate, it can cost lives, destroy trust, and blind you to the very people fighting to protect us all. True justice means seeing beyond bias, standing against corruption, even when it hides in the same uniform. And sometimes, the man you try to tear down is the only one strong enough to lift the system back up. The end. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths.